So how does a small, remote combat base become one of the most powerful symbols of an entire war? Well, that's exactly what happened in Vietnam. Today we're going to break down the incredible story of a place called Con Thien.
You know, the name itself, Con Thien, actually translates to Hill of Angels. Sounds peaceful, almost serene, doesn't it? But this was a U.S. Marine Corps combat base, and it was planted just a few kilometers from the border with North Vietnam, right near the Demilitarized Zone, the DMZ.
But for the U.S. Marines who fought and died there, it had a much, much grimmer name, the Meat Grinder. So, yeah, you have to ask, how does a place called the Hill of Angels get a nickname like that?
So what was it about this one little hill that made it so important and so incredibly deadly? Well, it really all boils down to its location, a spot that was, at the same time, its greatest strength and its most terrifying weakness.
Okay, so check out this paradox. On the one hand, Con Thien had huge strategic value. From the top of this little hill, you could see everything, 15 kilometers all the way to the coast, and more importantly, deep into North Vietnam. It was meant to be a key piece of the McNamara Line, this whole barrier system designed to stop enemy infiltration. But, and this is a big but, its location was also its Achilles heel. Being just 3 kilometers from the border meant it was basically a sitting duck for North Vietnamese artillery. They could just pound the base and then pull back where they couldn't be hit. It was this strategic pressure cooker just waiting to explode.
And in the summer of 1967, that pressure cooker absolutely started to boil over. The fighting around Con Thien didn't just gradually ramp up. No, it escalated with just brutal, brutal speed.
So, starting in May, the U.S. launched this relentless series of massive operations. You had Hickory, then Prairie 4, Buffalo, and Kingfisher, all of them designed to clear the DMZ and push back the People's Army of Vietnam, or PAVN, who were really stepping up their attacks. And look, this wasn't just a few skirmishes. This was a full-on, high-intensity campaign that basically turned the whole area into a non-stop battlefield. The fighting got especially savage during Operation Buffalo in July. That operation actually led to the single worst day for the Marines in the entire Vietnam War.
And the cost of all this? It was just staggering. We're talking hundreds of Marines killed and thousands wounded in these operations. The fighting was absolutely ferocious, often hand-to-hand in these fortified bunker complexes. And even though U.S. forces claimed much heavier losses on the PAVN side, the price they paid for every single inch of ground was just incredibly high.
And then, September 1967. This is when the whole situation reaches its terrifying peak. Con Thien wasn't just another battlefield anymore. It became a full-blown siege. And, for the very first time, the whole world was about to be watching.
All right, just try to picture this. For about a week, from September 19th to the 27th, the PAVN just unleashed a massive, non-stop artillery bombardment on the base. We're talking over 3,000 rounds slamming into this tiny area. On one day alone, September 25th, a staggering 1,200 rounds hit the base. For the Marines stuck inside, there was literally nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
But the American response was just as overwhelming. I mean, you had Marine artillery firing back with over 12,000 rounds. U.S. Navy ships offshore lobbed in another 6,000, and then from the air, over 5,200 bombing runs. It was just this cataclysmic duel of pure firepower. But here's the thing. This siege did more than just change the battle. It really changed the perception of the war back home. See, for the first time, American media had journalists right there on the ground, capturing the raw, unfiltered reality of this combat. This wasn't some abstract report from a faraway place anymore. This was real, visceral footage of American boys under fire, broadcast right into people's living rooms.
And what this did was create two completely different stories about the same place. For the military, look, Con Thien was a critical strongpoint, a key part of a bigger operation. But for the American public, it became something else entirely. It was The Ordeal of Con Thien, a title from a CBS News special. It was a Time magazine cover that showed the whole country the mud, the fear, and the chaos of the meat grinder. Suddenly, this one little hill became a powerful symbol of the war's brutal, grinding stalemate.
So, moving into 1968, you might think that after that massive siege, things would quiet down. But nope, the fighting didn't stop, it just changed. It evolved into this long, grueling war of attrition.
Life at Con Thien just became this endless cycle of low-level warfare. Constant artillery strikes. The Marines spent almost all their time just trying to reinforce their bunkers, piling on layers of steel airfield matting on the roofs, hoping it would stop the next round. And the clashes were constant. There's this one fascinating, chilling detail. Troops found a PAVN command bunker with a tiny little observation hole aimed directly at the Marine base. It was this constant reminder that they were always being watched. This whole grind just went on and on until late '68 when the Army's 5th Infantry Division finally took over the area from the Marines.
Okay, so this relentless, incredibly costly fighting at fixed bases like Con Thien, well, it couldn't go on forever. It eventually forced a massive shift in American strategy all along the DMZ.
And that shift came in October 1968 with a new plan called Dual Blade. What it did was officially halt all construction on that McNamara line. The old thinking, this idea of a static, fortified barrier, was basically thrown out the window. It was just too costly, too ineffective. It was time for a totally new approach.
And this new strategy was a complete 180. Instead of digging in and defending these expensive static bases, U.S. forces were going to get mobile and flexible. The new idea was to rely on surveillance, using electronic sensors and patrols to find the enemy and then hit them with fast mobile forces. They even started closing down non-essential bases. So really, the lessons that were learned in Blood at Con Thien, they ended up fundamentally changing how the entire war was fought in that region.
So, when you look at the whole story of Con Thien, from a strategic chess piece to a brutal media symbol, to the very thing that forced a change in strategy, it really leaves us with a powerful and pretty difficult question. When a single piece of ground, a hill of angels, costs so much in blood and treasure, how do you even begin to define what victory really means?